Hello, everyone. Welcome to Filecoin Core Dev 78, I believe. And we're talking about FIP 100 and sort of the next steps that we have. And Danny is helping us spearhead like what the next steps are in coordination with all of the core devs. So maybe Danny can give us a high-level overview of where we're at and some of the things we're going to be doing next. And feel free to join when you listen to this to join the conversation.
So, with my proviso that I don't really know how in the loop the core devs have been where you are in this story. Quite a lot has happened in the last week or so. FIP 100 is the proposal to remove the batch balancer and replace its value accrual and system with a fee structure for onboarding sectors. It's been proceeding, it's been quite complicated, but I think everybody has wanted to do something relatively quickly to cope with the spiky gas costs. I think the argument in favor of the system that has been proposed is that it's a more rational and easier to predict system overall. The challenge is making the predictions about what that is and understanding it without it being in practice. What's happened in the last week is some of the analysis was published and discussed in the storage providers working group and in Slack channel and network announcements. We had some concerns from many of the APAC SPs about the numbers in that and some other concerns which are in the GitHub discussion, which I always encourage people to go to and participate in, and we can throw a link in there. I think one of the biggest questions for me, I'm acting head of governance right now, is what it means to get to consensus on this. While there is disagreement, there is not universal disagreement, and in particular we're getting it's not that there's universal disagreement in the SP community. So I want to do two things as part of the governance process. I want to see what we're successfully doing is bringing out what those concerns are, and also see if there's changes that we can incorporate into the FIP that will address to a greater or lesser extent of that. The challenge we have in governance is knowing when that is done. Negotiations can go on forever. We definitely get a feeling, and I have a feeling that people want to address and fix this problem quickly. We're kicking around in the last days of this sort of ways that we could make this more flexible and more amenable to input. I guess the main thing to announce here is I think we have consensus amongst all the players to extend the end of last call to Tuesday of next week. It would have been Friday. It had already been extended by a week because there was a sense in which people should give input into this. So we're going to extend it a little bit more and take that hit for MV25. I guess the point that you join this is, how can we get all of this information in? How can we work out if there are possible compromises? And at that point, how do we determine whether we have a soft agreement to go forward? So that's where I am as governors.
Yes, maybe as one of the authors, kind of responding to AMAs, one-off questions in various channels, but most especially where the governance conversation is happening in the FIP discussion. I think there's been some good questions raised and a lot of answers in there. So if you're wanting to keep up with it, I think that's a good place to go to get the latest. Again, right now we'd kind of ask people to express their perspective in that discussion so that we can get a better vantage point on kind of like overall perspective so that core devs can assess all the different stakeholder groups and pros and cons for moving forward with this FIP and removal of batch balancer and per sector fee. And we are actively looking at, if there are changes or adjustments that are within the scope of what's already been proposed and aren't a huge pivot from the path and what has been shared and communicated across the community, but that allow us to all move forward together, kind of with a compromise solution that, even if not perfect for anyone, we can all get behind as like a good step forward and learn from with real data from how it performs in the ecosystem. And I've actually gotten a number of Slack messages from folks along the lines of like, do you think that we could see how this performs and then, collect data on it and make changes based on that? And it's like, yeah, like I hope that does exactly what I would hope to do. I'd be curious if there are things that we can all agree on and get behind that we really want to test and learn from, and we think is a good step forward, but maybe isn't the be all end all perfect step forward, so that we can, at least get better than where we are today and unblock onboarding rates on gas bottlenecks. And so that's kind of where we are now. And I think having a couple more days of last call for people to continue parsing new information and some of the responses that are landing in there, and some of the folks that are in favor of and championing this FIP and other channels to express their support and interest in seeing this land. And then we can kind of take stock beginning of next week and try and synthesize where we're at, kind of from a last call finalization perspective.
How difficult would it be to collect historical information? Basically, what I'm thinking is that like we could say, what if all of the current sectors are paying the fees that they would be paying if they had those fees signed, like when they were onboarded, or like going back to the beginning of the network or some point in the past, like what would it look like over time? That I think might, because like we do have a lot of information. We don't know what'll happen because things change. The network is pretty dynamic. But I'm just wondering like if that's feasible and if that might be helpful.
So for example, like backward in time, try and assess what gas costs would have been.
Well, we can't really assess
onboarding rates might have been, and how the fee might have performed. I'm
mostly concerned about fees. Like the gas, at least for the near pass, has been pretty low, except for a few bumps. So my question is like thinking about what the fees would have been.
In a time of high gas fee congestion, how would this fee would have compared to those high gas fee congestion timeframes? Is that your?
No, just generally what the fees would have been. Like again, because these fees are detached from gas, so they're not applied when there's a lot of congestion or not a lot of congestion. We can compare them to like, and here's the constant rate you would spend on onboarding and stuff like that at different gas fees. We can't even look at historical gas fees as well. We do have the information. This does slightly affect gas fees but like we have had times when like we were above the batch balancer minimum and stuff like that. We can also look at those periods of time. But the main thing I'm looking for is more like, okay, like purely looking at ROI. Like let's just look at like basically what would people's ROI have looked like in the past, assuming we had these fees. I don't know if that'll help. Like I'm not the.
You have to, you have to talk a little bit about how you are able to change things, but we can make that ask to the modeling side of things, at least with historical data. It's historical, so you don't have to make forward-looking projections, but you do have to sometimes figure out which subsets of the information are connected to each other.
I mean,
it's like, great, the network would have value accrued, to XYZ point over the last 2 years if we'd been in that world.
So one thing we I was kicking around was also just to this is just to throw into the discussion, though it's really not sketched out, is that, you know, people have very different ideas about what the consequences of this fit would be, and just setting some sort of review period for it. There's nothing more we came up with beyond that, but I just want to throw it into the written discussion that's something that's also in the air, so to make this feel less like a one-way door.
I think that was Rod was also flagging that we have other FIPS that might be beneficial for, to have explicit reviews, so that we could evaluate how other changes to, you know, critical network parameters like termination fees perform in practice, and whether or not they align with the original intention, and we see the adaptation that we're hoping to see, or if it causes problems we don't expect.
Yeah. My thought was that we could build it as part of the process, whereby, because right now we do have review that happens. We've got testing that when these things go live, we've got testing plans to look to make sure they're working, to see that things are okay. People casually monitor them as well that are interested, but maybe making a formal process whereby a FIP needs to, well, maybe it's a certain class of FIPs needs to have a group of stakeholders review the data after a period of time and give a report, simple or complex. You know, it might be just as simple as saying, this is great. But actually having that as part of the process, where a certain amount of time goes past, a report needs to come back to say, this is great, or this hasn't quite worked according to plan.
Yeah, and also establish some criteria for that, right, in the FIP. Like, I think that you know, you say our belief is that these variables will go in the right direction. If they're not going in the right direction, then we need to review this, and that's maybe that's how we get around the idea of, like, does this default to open or close? Does the review have to reach consensus that it changes, or does the review have to reach consensus that it stays? And then we can define two boxes for that, like, if everything according to what the FIP wanted is going the right way, you have to have a strong argument to change it. And otherwise, it will continue. Anyway, just speculation that we're throwing out here.
It also ought to be clear in the FIP process that putting up a FIP to undo a previous FIP should be okay. It's like, you know, doing a revert on GitHub. This is normal behavior.
Okay.
We did that.
Yeah.
We remember we had like a window post one, and then we had a FIP to undo making window post gas free or something like that. I forget what exactly it was.
If there's a cohort of stakeholders that believe that this has been bad for the network, and you know, we roll out with fees and it's been bad, they're quite welcome to put up a FIP, make the case, and go through the same process, and that should be completely reasonable.
Yep.
They might feel like there's barriers because you know, the governance process does seem to. I think people have the sentiment that it's a walled garden, but I think that's something worth you know, continuing to chip away at. That this needs to be an open process that people feel like they've got some stake in.
Yeah, I've definitely heard from a lot of people as part of this that, you know, this is exactly where our governance system shows its strain, and it's kind of I'm not apologizing here, but like it would have been nice to get some governance reforms in before we hit one of these spicy FIPS moments, but I think it's worth kind of using what we're learning here to feed into what those governance reforms are going to end up looking like. So hopefully this will be the last of these ones where we have to agonize about how the process should change.
Great. Question for you, Danny. So just to get clarity in terms of next steps, last call to be extended until Tuesday. So if we continue to have significant pushback or unresolved comments or questions, what's the plan?
So I think that's what we need to review on Tuesday, because it could go
Mhm.
in any number of ways, right? I mean, I'm going to be explicit here. I'm not someone who believes that soft consensus means that nobody objects.
Right.
I do, but if a constituency is feels that this is a bad idea, then I think we have to reject it. Traditionally, core devs is the place for that. But we have to take a temperature at that point. At the moment, I think that there are strong pushback about these particular figures, but these particular figures have only been out for a few days. And people are still kind of processing them. And that's exactly what these last few days are. So I think we can only merely make that decision on Tuesday, but we can keep people abreast of that. And I'm guessing it ends with a core devs meeting of some sort. But the format of that, I'm sorry, I'm new here. I don't know. we should structure that, but I think we'll have a clearer idea on Tuesday.
No, Tuesday. Good. Sounds good. Are there additional questions or thoughts from anyone before we wrap up? No? Okay. So we'll reconvene on Tuesday and know where we move from here. Thank you all so much for joining. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.